Okay, friends, thanks so much all for being here today. I want to introduce a lovely friend of mine, a colleague, a teammate of mine. I was invited to be part of a uber amazing group of folks underneath the organization called Undercurrent. You can check out undercurrent.com. And that's where I met Janet. And Janet is a spectacular being. She's, I'll share a little bit about her, but she'll share lots more about her. But she works with the United Nations. She's an entrepreneur. She's into leadership. Ultimately, she's into making a difference for the greater whole. And I'll ask her more details so you can get a little understanding of her background. But what I have to say is that what I really enjoy about you, Janet, is the purity of your heart, the willingness in your heart to make a big difference that touches many people's lives. So I want to thank you for being here. Everyone listen up here because there's great inspiration and insight that's going to come from today. So welcome, Janet. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Sachin, for having me. Honored to be here and happy to be here.
Janet, tell us who you are, a little about who you are, your background, and I know it's quite prestigious and you're quite humble. So just give us a little background, okay?
Okay. Well, I wear many hats, and but one of the major ones was is as a chairman of the Foundation for the Support of the United Nations. So that's sort of like the biggest hat that I wear together with my business. So with the Foundation for the Support of the United Nations, I sort of like lead my team, and together we work with the different UN missions and entities and different Fortune 500 companies to help the UN hopefully move forward by 2030, with the sustainable development goals. So I'm sure a lot of our listeners here are aware what that is. And I've been doing this since 2006, so almost what, 14 years now. And it's been a joy, yeah, just to be able to be at the forefront of what we are what our strength is as an organization, which is forging public-private partnerships, actually. So there was a time when inside the UN, the exposure of business perspective and private sector perspective is almost not super welcome, right? Because it's a diplomatic community, so it's understandably, right? It's a state level, country level, where we have our ambassadors, etc. But with the birth of the Sustainable Development Goals, we've seen just in the last few years how the UN has been really opening up to partnerships with private sector, business sector, and so that's where we come in as an organization, Foundation for the Support of the UN, and for me personally, being in both worlds as a businesswoman and at the same time leading our foundation. So so basically that's sort of like the umbrella of what I do, and then the others are. You want to know more? Just visit my LinkedIn. Or Google me. Yeah.
For those who don't have an understanding or know much about the Sustainable Development Goals, can you share a little bit about that? What the United Nations has started?
Absolutely, yeah. So this was so the 17 Sustainable Development Goals was birthed in 2016, right? And that's after the Millennium Development Goals, right? In 2015. So it's 17 goals, very ambitious goals, ranging from, no poverty, education for all, health for all, sustainability, climate change, all those global issues that we share as human beings, right? And the aim, with the UN leading it, together with then 193 countries, the aim is really by 2030 for us, collectively as human beings, both the government and private sector and all the actors, including us on a personal level, that by 2030 we are able to achieve this set of 17 Sustainable Development Goals that touches pretty much all the aspects of our lives as human beings. But and that's in essence, what the Sustainable Development Goals are. And at the end of that, this SDG 17, you know, again, is what sort of like embraces everything and puts everything together, and that is partnerships for the goals. So yeah, it is still, we're hoping, you know, that we are able to move forward collectively still to make that happen in 2030. Although realistically, we're looking at, of course, with the pandemic and all that, you know, we might have to extend that 2030. We'll see. We have a decade pretty much to.
So we got to turn the gas on, or actually we got to turn the gas off and maybe turn something else on.
Yeah. So
you're in the trenches with politicians. You're in the trenches with diplomats, face on, head on, and all of this. Okay. So I'm probably going to ask you a question that people don't usually ask you. What is the actual reality of that world? Is there an actual real movement towards a better change on this planet? Is how much interference pattern there is, how much ego is in that world, how much is there really an altruistic movement? I'd like to get into the reality of what's going on.
Right. This is a very real question, Sachin, and absolutely, I'll shed light as best as I could, you know, with you and our friends. But it's a mix of everything. I mean, you know, people have different views of what goes on in the global diplomatic stage, right? In global diplomatic community, especially inside the United Nations, you know, when we have this UN General Assembly every September, for example, where all the presidents and the kings and queens and prime ministers all gather here in New York, right, to talk about our global issues, etc. And again, for the past 3 years, the Sustainable Development Goals. So just like any other organization, and I say this all the time, just like any other global organization where it is composed of people, it's run by people. It's you know what I mean? Different kinds of background, etc. The United Nations has its strength, right? But also has its own weaknesses. Still, you know, I believe there's no perfect organization, right? For me, you know, as long as an entity or an organization, and pretty much all, right, is run by human beings, right, you know, there will always be imperfections. There will always be internal conflicts. There will always be differences in decisions, especially at the top level, where for the most part, each ambassador, for example, that represent their countries inside the United Nations have their own country's interests to safeguard, have their own country's interest to voice out, you know, when they gather together, and they protect that, and they want it to be heard, you know, as much as possible. So you imagine 193, right, member states. Now I think we have 194, and you know, each wanting to voice their contribution, their opinion, what the government is doing in a particular topic, you know, of discussion, for example, okay, reduction of poverty, right, et cetera. So, and then having to voice all that, and then series of meetings, and having to agree, you know, at the end of the meetings, right, to come up with a resolution, and that this resolution has to work for everybody pretty much as possible, right? And that goes with voting. So the nations vote, okay, should we adopt this resolution? Should we not adopt it, et cetera, et cetera. So as you could see, there's a lot of political game that's going on in there. At the same time, what is very interesting about this, and it's very unique, is that the diplomatic play, that's what sets the UN and what's going on inside so unique, is that whether you like it or not, as an ambassador, for example, no matter how much you wanted to disagree, you know, with certain topic that's being talked about, or certain resolution that's being adopted, it's so different with outside, you know, where like the normal politicians, where you could really bicker. And you know, I mean, bicker and Twitter it, you know, Twitter the hell out of it, and you know what I mean, and attack each other. It's different at the diplomatic stage, right? There is that unspoken unspoken, rule, if you may, that's being observed, and to be able to pretty much
Particular form of
convey,
decorum, a way of decorum, a way of
exactly that decorum and stuff, yeah. And what's um what's even unique about this is that just like any other organization and any other groups of human beings, at the end of every meetings, at the end of all those formalities and decorum, and inside the General Assembly, for example, you see that there are blocks, there are cliques.
no, really.
Absolutely, again, like I said, it's just like any other organization, even us as kids, when we were at school, we had our own groups, we had our own cliques. It's the same inside the UN. The ambassadors have their own cliques, many times it's called blocks, so the ambassadors from same geographical location with same interest, for example, just like the Pacific Islanders, so it's like 11 countries in that particular block, so they gather together and talk about, okay, what just happened, how do we, what I mean, like, okay, pass a resolution that expresses our own, what I mean, our own opinion on this, based on our our interest as a Pacific Islanders countries. So another block is the EU, right? So there's the EU, and then another block is Central American, South American, all that kind of thing. So during those times also is when these ambassadors bond on a personal level. So I'm friends with quite a few of them. So I hear all these stories from them, of course, firsthand, etc. It just amazes me how, at the end of the day, no matter how high level a person is, as an ambassador, as a prime minister, as a president, vice president, etc. At the end of the day, it goes home to that being a person.
Yes.
You know what I mean? That need to be part of a group, be part of a clique, and that need to be able to express entirely what you really want to say that you can't say at the General Assembly because you can't say it, right? So that kind of thing. So you see, so it's a complicated, but at the same time unique, and sometimes beautiful, but sometimes so boring, kind of. I'm sure a lot of us here have heard of how many times the meetings inside are really, you fall asleep pretty much for the most part if you're not used to it. But a lot of things are being achieved, of course. And for me, I tell this to everybody, as imperfect as it is, as many scandals and as many, doubts cast over the organization through the years, questionable, scandals overseas, et cetera, how certain calamities are handled, certain international, situations are handled. The United Nations is still the only international organization that's able to unite as many countries as possible on this planet to act, to share, to support, issues and projects and programs that are designed to pretty much benefit people, save mankind, save our planet, all the social issues. So I have very high respect to the United Nations, again, and acknowledging its imperfections, because it's managed by people, no matter how high level.
Seems like such a huge job to bring together 190, 200 nations together,
Right.
have representatives of all of them, come up with an omni-win, a consideration of a win that
Yeah.
can serve the whole and not just faction and be beneficial to some whatever particular party, right? And one of the things regarding the United Nations I wanted to ask, how powerful do you feel that it is as a body, as a whole, to direct society? What is its actual power right now?
The mob, if the United Nations if only it can consistently function and carry out its mandates the way it was founded, the way it was supposed to function, and carry out the principles for when it was founded 73 years ago, right? It would have been, I believe, a much, much more powerful and influential organization that will lead, that's leading so many countries and leaders right now to be better, to for the planet, for mankind, whether that is education for all, reduction of poverty, no hunger, saving our planet, climate change, all that kind of thing. And unfortunately, we can't say that that is the case right now because of so many other factors. And again, like I said, nothing is perfect, right? We have expectations. And I believe the UN, as complicated as it is with the memberships, with the Security Council, with the General Assembly, with the different supporting bodies, it's doing its best to answer the call of what is needed right now. Although for me and so many others, we believe that it could be better. The power can be more, the power can be stronger, the influence can be more powerful to move, a more unified, world, to be better as human beings. That's
Oh,
what, that's what
you know,
I believe.
a dream I have, a vision that I keep having, is taking all these leaders, world leaders, and having them go through an experience of unity consciousness,
Right.
where beyond the intellect, beyond the scientific rationale, beyond the understanding that we're one humanity, but then for all of us to have a tacit internal experience of our synergistic, symbiotic nature. My belief is that we've moved away from our unity is because we've lost our connection to our symbiotic. You're a family of mine. I'm a family member. We are actually all family, whether
Yes.
we recognize it or not. It's not my family here. We're actually one world family. The
Yes.
genetics have shown this. It shows that we're all Africans, if you will, in some way or some
Yes. Yeah.
form,
Yeah.
and that we're one humanity in a very large, continuously moving migration pattern, continuously moving. And I believe that awareness is more and more and more dawning, more and more becoming awake. But I believe when our leaders are willing to go through experiences that bring them into the inner awakening, the inner knowing that we actually are one, then that transformation in consciousness will have a direct effect in the architectural designs of whatever is brought forth in terms of intentions, applications, rollouts of activities and such. So,
I completely agree, Sachin. Very well said. I think that it's an overdue. It's a long overdue phenomenon to happen. It's a long overdue action to happen. That if all these leaders get into that, like what you said, that consciousness, right, internally, and have that inside of them, then the effect externally translates to the actions, that will definitely benefit um, us all.
Janet, another area that you're very strong advocate of from your own personal life, you shared with me that you're very much involved in LGBT plus, um, standing up for that whole realm which has been marginalized. Can you
Absolutely.
share about your experience on that, and also how that floods into the in your worlds?
Thank you, Sachin, for sharing this. And yeah, I mean, it's me, right? I'm gay and open, and as a child and now, and even inside UN, I'm probably just one of the few who's very out and open and respected for that. And I think that it's a responsibility for me to be able to do whatever it is that I could, to make sure that um, that the LGBTQ plus community is accepted. We're equal. We're human beings. We're not like different, right? I mean, we're all different as human beings, but we're not like, you know what I mean, like those kinds of other labels, etc. So, and at the end of the day, we all want freedom. So for so many millions of members of the LGBTQ plus community, freedom is actually something that they don't have for all the other reasons, for so many reasons in so many other countries, cultural, economics, etc., social pressure, peer pressure, family pressure, etc. So that to me is so unacceptable. It should not be like that. I mean, as idealistic as I am, and that's my idealistic perception. That's me. I know that the reality sometimes it's not what it is, and I want to do more, in my power, in my influence, with my voice, to be able to release, I guess that's help release, that's help free as many as I can from that like being by like from being imprisoned,
Yes.
for being who they are, not being able to be out in the open and tell the world, hey, I'm gay, and I'm a human being just like you.
Beautiful. I'm actually so glad that you're part of that world and that you're bringing this deeper understanding of unity and this love of our humanness and this love of how we identify sexually, how we identify within ourselves. And I believe slowly, step by step, that we are coming to a world where we recognize, embrace, acknowledge, love, appreciate, and honor these unique aspects of our being and who we are and our lifestyles, as long as we're doing no harm to others.
Yeah,
That's
that's exactly. Yeah. For me, I mean, one of my raw principles is that, hey, you're not putting food on my table. I'm not spending your money. So, you know, I'm respecting, I respect you for who you are. I'm not stepping on your toes. So, this is who I am. So, you
that,
know,
that- I want to ask you something again, real pointed to yourself. You've gone through, in your life, you come from a Filipino background, I believe,
yeah.
right?
I grew up in the Philippines.
The very traditional values, very Catholic values. My wife is the same, very traditional Catholic values.
Yeah.
But you've also had moments where you've met those challenges of prejudice in some form or another. How is there any moment that you can remember where it transformed who you were being, how you connected with others, help them soften that hard shell of their judgment or their reactivity? Does any of, if you have a tale or a story in that realm of how you help melt or start to transform the prejudice that's in the world, something that you've experienced?
Um, I think for me, as far as I could remember, such, and it's because I've always been open, and I want to say it has not been as hard and challenging as the others. I have my own challenges, but again, I don't think I've ever encountered anything significant, and for that, of course, I'm humbled and I'm very grateful. But there were moments, I guess, during those times too, when it's more of like a self-imposed, um, uh, how would I say that? Like a self-imposed, oh, what if, like, okay, I'm headed to this kind of, like a deal or something. And then what if they find out, and, and then they charge me, and I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna get accepted to be part of this, this organization, or, to make this business happen and stuff. The only thing I would remember, I think that was really sucky, but I don't have anything against it now, but was that a couple of times, when I was younger, I was so fired up in joining this kind of like um, Christian organizations. They have a lot of voluntary stuff, and so I would go and enthusiastically introduce myself. I want to be part of that, and then a month or so, into the group, etc. And then all of a sudden, and they find out I'm gay. I mean, without me, I mean, I don't have to flaunt it and stuff, but of course they notice, and then they ask me right away, you're gay, and I said yes, and they have a problem with that, and they don't want to talk to me anymore. And then I've had to leave that so-called, Christian organization. So I think that's the worst I've experienced. Yeah. And I was young then. So for me, my attitude then was fine, you don't want me, and I'm just here to want to volunteer, fine, But I guess during that time, I got hurt too, because, and I was young, again, like I said, I guess I was in my 20s. And I would question. I remember I questioned a couple of times, it's like, I just wanted to volunteer and help you guys. And then now you find out I'm gay, and then you're not talking to me anymore. And it's uncomfortable, so I'm going to leave.
Wow. So from what you're sharing, it's so valuable to first of all own and claim who you are as a person,
Yeah.
and most importantly, to first love and accept yourself in the full totality of who you are. That becomes I've always noticed it becomes our best protection when
Yeah.
we love and accept who we are. It becomes our best power, our superpower, when we
Yes.
love and accept who we are and not marginalize ourselves, regardless. And of course, this is easier said than done in certain circumstances, but that's the hero's journey we must take to
Yeah.
own all of us.
Exactly, Sachin. And not only us, being very comfortable and at home for who we are, and we love ourselves for that, but at the same time, our families and our friends. To me, that's all that matters, I remember when when I wrote my yearbook phrase, right? High school, I mean, college yearbook. Yeah, college yearbook, right? So what I signed in my yearbook, I remember very well. I said, what others think of me is not as important as how I think of myself. Yeah,
That's
and
liberating. It's so liberating, right?
it's that's exactly the word, Sachin. Thank you so much. I love that word. I mean, everything that I do, I mean, it's liberating. When
Yes.
you make those decisions and stuff, it's really liberating. And to me, at the end of the day, it's what matters, right? Freedom.
You know, whenever I'm working with teams and leadership, and you're a sought after leadership guide and supporter and trainer, one of the things, and this is something again with politicians, with politics, with
Right.
leadership, is one of the things, and we can get it mentally, but a practice is to look at what is the other's positive intent. What is their positive intent? So if they're saying you guys are this and this and this, there's two factioning wars, butting heads, there's an actual positive intent. Even you might have to move through the layers of vitriol and the layers of reactivity and anger and shaming and projection and whatever else is going on. But if you listen deeply enough, I believe that most people, not always everyone, but most people have a true positive intent. And if
Yes.
we can train ourselves, if we can have all the leadership of the world, that when they're having some form of dialogue, when they're having forms of negotiation around big things, that they're trained to listen for the positive intent that's aligned with your positive intent.
Yes.
And that is truly a sagely way. If you look at the great sages, the wisdom keepers in our society, they're always able, the grandparents, the elders, they're
Yes.
able to look at when you see two children fighting, as a parent myself, when they're younger, one wants the ice cream, the other one wants the ice cream, this and this. But someone has to hold that there's a positive intent for both of them, and have them speak to each other and recognize and agree upon the positive intent and work with the positive intent with each other.
Mhm.
So, how does this happen? I'd like to know, how does this happen in the realms that you work with? Is it happening? And if it is, how is it? And how can you, from your experience, how can we foster the seeing, the acknowledgement of each other's positive intent?
Right. Very, very, very. This is a very beautiful element, Sachin, and I wish that there's a way to sort of like fast track it so that everybody sees the positive intent from everyone. But to your point, and I agree. Uh, if this is if only this happens like in the real time necessity, like at this point, for example, right, with all this conflicts, etc., surrounding the pandemic, for example, a lot of people are not seeing that positive intent, from other people, just because of so many reasons. And in the leadership realm, right, whether that's UN or otherwise, or even CEOs of other businesses, I think, you know what? As a matter of fact, this pandemic actually revealed a lot of this. Take, for example, Mark Benioff of Salesforce, right? At the start of the pandemic, right, when the president of his alma mater, I think, University, UC in California, UC, no, UC, I don't know, University of California, San Francisco, is there? Yeah, one of the UC systems, right? He called Mark Benioff and said that they're having a problem with PPE, etc., and they're running short of masks, that's needed, and they need help. And so right away, Mark Benioff called his key people. Right away, he called a couple of other CEOs of big companies and say, listen, we got to do something about this. To make the story short, they really mobilize immediately, so that they were able to right away purchase masks and PPEs, and a couple of other products, and ship that in the US, in California, and distributed that to those who needed it and that hospital in the UC system. So what I'm trying to point out is that at that point, getting into his head, Mark Benioff, he was so sure that when he calls his people, particular leaders in his company, when he calls the other couple of CEOs and tells them, hey, we need to do this, right away he knew and he saw that, okay, this is my positive intent. We want to help, we want to help the people who called us. And I know that you share this positive intent with me, and let's just do it. Let's mobilize this, providing the solution to the problem. So, does that make sense, Sachin? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so at that level, and same thing. For example, with Mike Bloomberg, with mobilizing for Bloomberg Philanthropies, partnering with everyone else, with Chef Jose Andres, right? With the World Kitchen, and feeding the people and all that, mobilizing all the restaurant owners, etc. So they knew in their heart they had that positive intent, and without hesitating, they knew that this positive intent, they see it, they saw it, they've seen it, they can see it, that, and then without hesitation they then express or communicate back to all the other collaborators that they called to join them, right? So that kind of thing, and then it's sort of like a ripple effect after that, with starting with that positive intent inside of them. So it's a beautiful force. And to your point, if we could make that happen across the board and at the top decision-making level, with global issues such as the United Nations, it will be a much better world.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So that brings me to ask you, from you're involved with companies and organizations that are working, aligning with United Nations. You help liaison the interactions.
Yes.
Give me a sense of, I want to know, what do you think are our worst problems that we still need to deal with? And so that's the dark side. What's the worst stuff that's happening that we're having challenges with? Why I'm asking is so we can put some more power on there. And number two, where are the good things? What's the best things that you're seeing happening right now? So we have both sides, one that we need to pay attention on, and one we can start celebrating and go, okay, we're moving in the right direction as a
Right.
world.
Yeah. As a world, looking at it and looking at all those issues right now, the most evil problem still is human trafficking and displacement. So the migration issue, right? We have like God knows how many millions of camps we have for those who are misplaced, right? Fleeing from their countries that are in conflict, etc. And of course, at the end of the day, the children, for the most part, are the collateral damage and the victims of this. It's millions of them, and from that, it's a breeding ground in itself for human trafficking, right? So to me, that particular problem is still very, very bad as globally as human beings, and this is something that as stronger the government collaborations have become, and when as much money have been poured into addressing this issue, it's still a huge, massive, evil problem that for some reason we're not even putting a dent to it. No, not even closer. As a matter of fact, it's growing because it is giving birth to so many other forms of, what I mean, of unacceptable problems within that particular problem, like even in the camps alone, right? Yeah, so there's all that.
So the migration problem is also a human trafficking problem. They're interrelated.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, you know that those are the people who are displaced, right? And they're refugees, right? So they get into refugee camps, etc. I mean, they are the most
Advantage of that.
vulnerable. Yes, it's the most vulnerable, members of our society. I mean, they don't have anything. They don't have homes. The only thing they have are themselves as a family and the clothes they wear, shoes or slipper. That's it. They don't even have homes, Sachin. And so they're the most vulnerable. I mean, for the most part, they're not even treated as human beings anymore in so many other camps. And to me, that is completely, it baffles me all the time, when I read the numbers, when I read the updates. It's like we haven't even dented that.
Okay.
Yeah.
As a father, I feel that very deeply. I wouldn't even want to imagine the horrific lives that young people are being used as chattel in the most horrific ways. And I believe, like you, that that's an evil that needs to be collectively not only looked at, but we need to stop. If we can coordinate the world right now to stop or to slow down, flatten the curve with COVID, I believe we can do the same. After my hope, my wish, my dream, and my work actually, and yours is too, is as the COVID emergency starts to become more balanced and more regulated and we're able to deal with it, that the same amount of energy, vehemency that we're applying as a collective should then continue to keep going in momentum to the worst things on the planet, and that being one of them. So I'm all for that. Whoever can support that, all of us, I believe we need to really rally around, because as a society, if we can't protect our youth, we can't protect our innocent, then we're not going to be protecting ourselves.
Exactly.
We're destroying ourselves by destroying the innocence of our future.
Yes, exactly. I mean, it's to me, I mean, just just from the very you know, basic element of it is just really heartbreaking.
One of the warrior principles is to feel into what do we tolerate and what do we not tolerate. Some things are worth tolerating, expanding our heart, expanding our inclusiveness, allowing ourselves to say, yes, I need to open and relax and be more inclusive and be more tolerant. And there's a noble side to wholesome tolerance, but there's also a power of what we won't tolerate anymore.
Right.
And I believe we've been tolerating this as societies, as governments, and as communities. And that when we say enough is enough, we will not tolerate the harm of our youth, the harm of the innocent, the harm of children, the harm of women,
Yeah.
of also men, of course. So I stand with you, and I'm asking everyone here to up level their intolerance of injustice to the weak within our society and find a way where we can continuously stand up and say no. When we collectively say no, all those forces shrivel. When we don't say anything, they flourish.
Yeah. They
Okay,
flourish.
let's take a breath with that. Okay, so now I'm going to ask you, well, how are we winning as a society? Where are we winning? Where are we making strides that we can go, yes, okay, we're in the right direction. I can breathe and I can support that and I can feel we're moving into a brighter future.
Right. Yeah. So one of the top ones where we're leading, and we believe that we're making lots of strides is actually education. So basic education. Yeah. So it's thanks mostly to technology, right? Because now, with technology, we don't need, being able to reach, faraway places, to bring education, that becomes now very possible without sending teachers on foot, pretty much, to go to these, villages, etc. For as long as there's internet and that the children can be connected to, computers, that, etc. They can now learn virtually, right? And for the most part, instead of sending, for example, 10 teachers, organizations now only need to send 2 teachers, and then everybody has their computers and they can learn like that. So if you read, and everybody, reads about it, we're making great strides with education, basic education. And, we start from there, right?
Yeah.
Basic education. And I can't believe it. We're in the 21st century and we're still, working on basic education for all. It's just the reality. But it's a great start, to be able to say that, okay, we're educating as many of our kids now, as possible, as much as we can, even virtually. And yeah, even with cell phones, etc. So yeah, and then now also, not only through technology, but there is that. There's much more awakening that has happened the last decade from people themselves, donating money, donating books, donating to organizations that sends teachers, abroad, volunteering, as young as our high school students here in the US, for example, they go abroad to teach, summer, a couple of months, go to those villages and teach, for the summer. So those kinds of things. I'm very happy to say that we're making good strides with education.
Fantastic.
Yeah, yeah.
That warms my heart, that warms my heart.
It's very important, yeah, because ignorance, it's ignorance that breeds all these problems that we have, So I think education is a very basic tool to fight that ignorance and be able to nip the bud a lot of times, from the start. So yeah, before so many other problems arise, when there is education, then you crush ignorance. And again, like I said, going back to what I said earlier, ignorance is for the most part the cause of a lot of
It's the
evil.
breeding ground for all these ills.
Yeah,
But education and bringing together humanness,
yeah,
sharing, breaking bread, lifting each other up, honoring each other, it's the path forward. It's always been the path, but now even more concentrated. Um, Janet, many of my Warrior Sage family here, this is our private Warrior Sage community page. We're all in some form of leadership. We're learning to lead our lives in this form of leadership now. This whole COVID experience has hit the world and hit us all. From your experience as a world level leader, as a guide ushering in new reality, supporting all of that in a positive direction, I'd love to hear what's in your heart to share with us as warrior sages. What's in your heart and soul to share with us today? You know, as we start winding down today.
Um, there's so much. Okay.
Please, I want to
I
hear what your so much is.
thank you, Sachin. This is such a beautiful opportunity. Um, I believe, like what you said, that we can all collectively harness our energy to fight these ills at a much, much higher level, energetic level. And that's my call to action to everyone. Each of us are already contributing. I know and I believe we're contributing a lot on a physical realm, what we do with our business, what we do with our influences, our ability to lead others to do what is right, what is good, do the right thing, and our ability also to speak to that and use our voice, for positive impact. But I think the most important, at the end of the day, the most important thing is for us to be able to collectively harness our positive intents that comes from here and join that force collectively, have that strong energy to put all our intentions, positive intentions out there to the universe and speak it and claim it that this is what we want for the world. This is what we want for our families, ourselves, and that collectively we should achieve that, and we will do that with our energetic power.
Yeah.
It is my call to action. And
Beautiful.
yeah, that makes me really humbled and grateful to be here with you and with the others who are with us right now, Sachin.
Janet, you've hit it right on the nail. This willingness to claim what we actually want and not stand silent in just hope, but
Yes,
be in the power of creation rather than just consume what we've been told, consume what the experts say is the patterns we're moving towards, is to recognize there's a warrior and a sage within us all. And this is the time to voice and claim and own what is it that is true and real and fair and loving. What is it that we can do today? You know, the saying in the Kung Fu, in our warrior sage philosophy, what must I do today to live, to love, to die complete without regret? And so
yes,
I join you in that invitation and challenge, Janet. And I know we're up to doing good things on the planet. And everyone who's here, you have that voice within yourself. You have the power of change and capacity just as much as Janet, just as much as I, just as much as any president, prime minister of any country. You have that power right in your own home, right in your own locale. Stand in it, love it, own it. And there is something, there is an emergent movement, I'm sure, happening. I know it's happening within all of us. There's an emergent calling for us to stand in the fullness of our sacred leadership. This is the time. Let's go ahead and do it. We know it. Thank you so much, Janet, for joining us all today. I
you.
love you very much. I honor you for the good work that you're doing to uplift the United Nations, to uplift companies, organizations, to uplift leadership. Very grateful for you. Thank you so much for sharing your heart with us and your wisdom.
Thank you, Sachin. I'm fully honored. And thank you, everyone, for being with me, Sachin, today. I'll see you later again.
You betcha. Thanks,
Bye.
Liz.
Thank
Thanks for
you.
showing up. You know what to do. Let's get cracking. All right. Talk soon, Janet. Bye.
Awesome. Bye.